Hello friends, welcome to episode 47 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can. Whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game up to the next level. I am Sarah.
And I'm Rob.
Are we doing okay, Rob?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I am still trying to figure it all out and make sure that we actually can hear each other and get through this technological curve. And I'm sorry for the delay, everyone, that we were a few minutes off there. We had just a wee bit of technical difficulty that was on our end. That's all.
But you know what? These are great little growing pains, though.
Yes. Yes.
So for those of you who haven't heard, we are no longer with Podcast Detroit as of basically this show. This is going to be our last show.
Yeah.
And we are recording from a separate location now.
Yes. We are live in the new studio, our studio, actually.
Our studio.
Yes, we built this studio, I think is the easiest way to put that. So,
does that make it a studio conclave?
Nice! I kind of like.
Conclave.
Oh, see, there we go. I like that.
It's gold.
Yes, either that or they're gonna make us call it the Creche or something like that. Whatever turtles go to. Oh. So. Anywho, so yeah, we're kind of getting back to whatever normal is, and that's kind of where we're gonna end up with this. Is we're gonna start. We did this for obvious reasons, most current events and such, but it also gives us the opportunity to do things our way and kind of rebuild a little bit of what we want to do engineering-wise.
Yeah, it puts us kind of back in control of things for better or for worse.
Oh, totally. I agree.
Sometimes we don't have a sound engineer here for us to, or we had to put all the infrastructure together ourselves, and then we had to figure out how to hook it up, and then we had to figure out how to operate it, and we're breathing a little bit heavy about that because there's some raised nerves in the last 15 minutes, but
just a bit. Nothing too terrible, I would say. So hopefully everything sounds good on our new streaming service, which is MixLR or Mix Live Radio, however you want to say it. Their system seems very nice. Their support team is a wonderful group, and it seems pretty straightforward, which I really liked. There is a chat feature that they have. I'm going to kind of avoid it for now, and we're only going to be using the Discord chat. Mostly for our Patreon members who are taking care of us so well so that they have access to us there, but also because there's a ridiculous delay apparently in the chat app for us from the live stream, and I'd rather use the Discord to get more of a quick response off of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there may be other things that we'll be doing in the future, and we'll see how things go. This does give us a lot of flexibility. So
absolutely.
But we have a show today.
We do have a show.
Like a legitimate show. We're not going to be just talking about craziness. We had this contemporary show as an idea of what's a contemporary game and what's a contemporary setting and what does it really mean, and we kind of put it off, and then we kind of forgot about it, and then we were like, "Are we doing that this week?" And I was like, "Yes, we're doing that this week."
We had it on a list. We would get to it eventually. But I real quick before we get into the contemporary thing,
sure.
I want to talk a little bit about the craziness.
Okay.
But about the gaming opportunities.
That's right. So last weekend you played virtual with everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously with your storyteller sitting next to you.
Right.
But I looked in Discord and saw you in a chat group, but also I saw you with the tabletop simulator up.
Tabletop simulator.
How did that work out for you?
So that was actually surprisingly good. I got to be straight up. I was very doubtful going in. I was very skeptical.
Okay.
That it was going to give a good gaming experience.
Right.
But storyteller was my boyfriend Sean, and who's Heatsink here on the Discord.
One of the mods.
And he put a lot of work into setting it up and downloading a lot of different mods that allowed for things like dice rollers and a whole bunch of miniatures.
Right.
He had even things like it would bring in virtual tablets.
Oh,
you could pull up Google on. We were going to do D&D Beyond on those tablets the virtual space.
That is hilarious.
What we found out is that all of them shared the same account, so when I logged in, it was just me on everybody's tablet. So,
right.
Unfortunately, We weren't able to do that, but a lot of us were just able to pull up D&D Beyond because we were all playing on our computers.
Right.
So it really wasn't that much of a problem. We had virtual dice, with simulated physics.
Oh my lord!
And so
how now were you and him in VR?
Okay, so you can play it in VR.
Okay,
but I think Sean put his VR goggles on for like. I don't know, 15 minutes or something like that.
And then it just got annoying.
And then at one point, I just saw him just take the goggles off, and he just like put his head down and just pinched the bridge of his nose, and he was just like, ugh. I was like, are you okay? He's like, just eye strain from the goggles. Like, oh. And I was like, okay, so we're not going to be doing this in VR for 6 hours.
Okay, that's fair.
Now, you could.
Right.
But it works very well with just your mouse and keyboard.
Oh, okay.
You can use the WADS keys if you're familiar with those from basically any first-person shooter.
Sure.
Moving around, easily move your camera around. There's some camera controls you can do with your mouse as well. And basically, your cursor is your hand. And you can just pick things up, and like if you want to toss your dice, literally just grab them and just throw them across the table, and you can like drag and select multiple dice.
Okay.
And then when you pick them up, they'll all just kind of hover up off of the board.
So wherever they're at.
But then you give them a little shake, like move your mouse back and forth, and what it'll do is it'll gather them up into a bundle.
Oh, nice.
For you, and then you just flick them across the table with a little flick of your mouse, and let go of the mouse button at the end, and they will just in physics just roll.
Nice.
And they'll land, and you can see what they are, and they'll depending on which dice mod you're using, they'll even add them up for you at the end. So when you're dropping like, what is it, 8d8 or something like that for a cone of cold.
Yeah.
You don't want to sit there and like pick up each individual die and like have to move your camera to see what the
Yeah.
It'll just be like 8d8 plus equals 36.
Okay. Nice.
So, we had the little miniatures out there.
Nice.
He brought little those little status rings.
Oh.
That we've been using. He had a virtual version of those.
Nice.
And so it was just really, really nice just to be able to put it all and still have that authentic tabletop experience with the dice and the minis and the and everything.
Yeah. I feel that Knox here is talking about his session where they basically had one phone and Discord and that was it.
Oh, yeah.
And my thought is like, I think that's us old, where one of us is deaf and the other one has to like read the Discord like, what did I get? Like, you're blind, Bat. Just roll the damn dice.
Is this it? Did I crit?
That's going to be us in the retirement home. I totally could see that.
You rolled a D6. You didn't even crit.
I think that's really great. Like, I'd love to sit down and review with both of you soon because I've got a game on Saturday that involves you.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. I think I'm going to low-key it for that one. Probably just use, like, Roll20 and some Discord because most of my stuff's conversational for the most part. I don't need that much combat. But I'm interested to see what it looks like and to see how challenging it's going to be because some of my players, I feel, in my game, like, I don't want them to have a lot of struggle. I want them to be as simplified as going into as possible.
Yeah.
And so there's a technical level there that I would be concerned about. Because, I mean, they deal with technology every day, and a small problem really can stress out a whole team.
That's true.
So, did you feel that it went very smoothly for your group?
I was struggling with it for about 15 minutes or so, and then once I started realizing like what some of the controls were, and then I was like, oh, well, this makes sense now.
Did you have any like new players, like new not only D&D players but technological players, like people who never touched the virtual tabletop before?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
Players you're familiar with.
Yep. Our Discord is not.
Yep. They were pretty much. In fact, two of the players are pretty new to D&D to begin with.
Oh wow!
One of them is a mutual friend of ours,
right.
Who has role played with us in fact, it's one of our Patreon supporters, Ela May. But she's role played with us occasionally, but I wouldn't say she's like one of our like regular players.
I mean, she definitely wants to play more regular, but I know she hasn't been in a ton of games. Due to a number of reasons that we all have. But I think that. And then on a technological level, she plays some games. I mean, she doesn't do a lot of PC gaming, but she was able to grab it and work right with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other one was in Discord. She's Biblio Rose.
Okay.
And I know her particular technical level. So able to get right in and we played around with it, kind of pre-gamed with it for about an hour or so, to get people used to the controls.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So we almost did like a session 0, but not for
a tech session
zero.
Nice. No, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about session session zeros, and in remote play, I think it's just as important to do a tech session zero so that everybody's on the same level.
Yeah.
And you can fill in those gaps. Where someone may not be bringing Cheetos to the party, maybe throwing $5 on a Steam gift card to help them get the technology or software that they need might be helpful. So. But yeah, I think that's a pretty grand idea.
Now, Biblia Rose actually did ask me a question, and she asked me this in person, so she can go through like our normal Discord channels for getting the questions. But because we're on topic of this, about gaming remote and stuff like that, and we're kind of coming off the tail end of our last episode about gaming remote, I wanted to ask you this question, see what your opinion was. She brought up the idea of doing face cams.
Okay.
And
yeah.
Wanted to know if I felt like that would add something to the experience, or do we think that that's an unnecessary step?
Two things that I would say to that.
Sure.
One, face cams helped a lot for me in 7C because from a player's perspective, I could see engagement. I could tell when someone was there. I could talk to somebody directly. And it felt more... like if somebody wasn't responding to me because they were making an expression, it was so much easier to read.
Sure.
Like that is much easier when you look at somebody and you're just like, yeah, that I killed my father the other day, and they're, much like we're doing right now, you're making the stare, and
you're like the eyes kind of get wide, the eyebrows go straight up, and you're like.
But if it's just audio on Discord, you don't get that.
Exactly.
You have
hear
to
this
type it
disembodied
out.
voice going, I'm sorry, what?
Exactly. Now, I will say a second thing that I saw, and I saw this last week, was there are certain filters you can get for Skype and a few of the things that change your face into something else. And you can do like goblins and elves and things like that, so that it's not you, but it's like a puppet that's actually being manipulated.
I've seen some of those, and you do like different animal creatures and stuff like that too.
Exactly.
So it would be neat, like in our game, your wife plays a Khajiit, because it's set in the Elder Scrolls universe. To actually have like a cat face for her would be kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's more about being able to see the expressions of people, and if you have a lot of inter-party discussion, which I would see this being a major thing for games like yourself. You were talking about some of the session stuff that happened between you and Biblia Rose. Expressions are important for those kind of things.
They are.
Because you need to either say your expressions and be almost radio show-like, which is weird until you heard it. Like, if you're listening to Dick Tracy, there are things in Dick Tracy that happens that lets you know how the characters are reacting. Gasps, guffaws, mumbles, things like that you had to have. And most people don't recognize that in Discord, or in a chat app where you don't get to see that person. You have to have some way for them to know that you're reacting. And that makes it challenging. Right, so there's a lot of acting skills that go into something like that where you don't have those kind of looks across the table.
Now, I mean, I do see Knox here in the live chat, and he's commenting that he wouldn't want to do it. He doesn't have a cam anyways.
Right.
Now, mind you, the next thing he followed up with is, well, I'd have to think about it. I'm thinking about it and starting to see the appeal.
There is an appeal to it,
but understanding it's not for everyone. I think it's definitely
not in the least.
The condition, of course, is always group consent.
100%.
So
do with what you feel is really what it comes down to.
Exactly. So and understanding also it's another piece of equipment. Not everybody has that. It's another financial commitment.
100%. Luckily, a lot of that is coming down in price for people. Getting simple technology is easy. It doesn't have to be a great camera. It doesn't have to be something huge. But it also adds to the fact of what we talked about last week, where when you get into gaming, it is a private space. It is like you were in their home. So you don't want to have a lot of busyness going on around you.
Yeah,
you don't want to have dogs or kids or other things coming in. It's got to be some dedicated time.
Right.
So we have a Are we ready to get back?
Yeah. No. I think we talked about that. I just wanted to get that out because it was such a cool experience.
It was a good experience.
Like, I got to talk about
solid
this on the
good
show,
experience. So one of the first things that we got when we threw this out there was people were like, "What do you mean by contemporary game?" And I think what we're talking about when we talk about contemporary games is
we're so glad you asked.
Yes. So it is a story that can happen to real people in real settings, aka real life. So when you're talking about going to the king and talking about an orc invasion, that's not happening tomorrow at the White House.
Yes.
He isn't the king, although you could technically go and talk to the queen herself, and that could be a thing by all standards. But I would say, like, if you're talking about walking down the street and there's a bank robbery going on, that's pretty feasible. That's pretty... A detective stumbling across a secret cult, maybe, of worshippers of something, but I think that's reasonable in contemporary.
Sure.
But you start stretching from there, and it's about how far you stretch with the word contemporary. So...
I mean, I typically would define contemporary games as something that takes place in just in the modern era. Things that are you have cars, people have cell phones, there's television and internet and things like that. That's always kind of what I've defined contemporary as. But then, you just layer stuff on top of that to kind of get your individual flavors. So you get things like, the Dresden Files or Urban Shadows.
Oh, Urban Shadows, totally, yep.
So that's like contemporary fantasy.
Yeah.
I
mean, Buffy is a good example of contemporary fantasy
exactly.
where it's an aspect of it. Like, one of the things that I was talking about when I was originally looking at this was that you have flavors of it. You have, like, Harry Potter, which is a through the looking glass methodology. That's where the veil between what is today known as reality and what's really going on behind the scenes is actually cut off by some kind of a gate. In their case, it's magic users versus non-magic users. There are fantifical things, but they stay away from the mundanes, and that's the rule. Vampire kind of did that, a little bit, because,
with the Masquerade.
Correct. Which covers, Werewolf the Apocalypse and Mage the Ascension and Changeling, those types of worlds. And then you have a distinct timeline change, which is where you have reality as we know it, and then a shift occurs from something.
Right.
Shadowrun is a good example of that.
Aberrant is another great one.
Rifts actually is to a degree, but it's already set well beyond it.
Yeah.
The events occurred, and we're well beyond that. But if you talk about right at the break, you have that. Division, the video game, is a good example of a break like that.
Yep.
Another, aliens showing up, and having an alien invasion kind of a thing. That could be a time break. But again, there's still stuff that's going on that's very much distinctly this world. Hidden in plain sight. Yeah. So you've got things like Batman, to a degree, is that, I think, at the shallowest levels, where everybody's aware of crime in the city, but how often do you get to see the Joker doing something ridiculous?
Right.
You've got, S.H.I.E.L.D., or Men in Black, where you've got organizations who are keeping things in the past, keeping things under that veil.
But they're kind of shadowy and secretive. And
right.
Not everybody knows about them. You're not going to, like, run into a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent the same way you'd run into, like, a policeman.
Yeah. Hellboy is another example of that, where...
Oh, Hellboy, good
where
example,
you've literally got, like, the goblin market is something that you can't find normally. You have to know where to find it and how to get put there, And so that gives you that edge of extraordinary that's just outside of the view of what normal people see. And then finally you have normal people in extraordinary events. And that's where you've got situations like, Silent Hill, or Call of Cthulhu, or Parasite Eve, where you've got a detective who is going to look at a murder case, and suddenly, he walks in and the body isn't on the floor, it's on the ceiling. And there's a priest there in the crime scene looking at things. Something isn't right.
Yeah.
Some dude who calls himself the ancient son of Van Helsing has shown up as well. And now that normal person's dealing with extraordinary events.
Yeah.
But still normal people dealing with that situation.
Yep.
I think... gosh, now I can't think of it. The TV show... Stranger Things.
Stranger Things, yeah.
Is a perfect example
a really good example of a contemporary sort of...
Yeah, but it's normal people in extraordinary events. I mean, to a degree, it's hidden in plain sight, and to a degree, it's also a distinct change or through the looking glass, because you've got aspects of a hidden thing, but I think it's closer to normal people in extraordinary events.
See, to me, though, like, if I've got my druthers, if I'm going to pick a contemporary setting, like, it's definitely going to be normal people in extraordinary
Well, yeah, you love Call of Cthulhu and that kind of thing. It's almost a horror aspect in that sense.
We've talked about tropes a lot in the past, and we've talked about, like, what my favorite tropes is zeros to heroes.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, you don't get much more than zero than, like...
Hawkeye? Sorry, I had to throw it in
That's going to anger at least one of our listeners.
I know, I think she'd throw down and say that was totally legit.
That's fair, fair. No, but just you know, I love the zeros to heroes trope, and I don't think you get much more zero than like this is, you know, Carol Smith. She works at 7-Eleven, and now we're in the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Or now, you know, Cthulhu is risen. So what are we gonna do? You know?
Yeah.
I just think there's, you know, if you go into a story with someone who's already a hero, you know, it's like you're already standing on the shoulders of a giant to try to tell extraordinary stories, and there's something to be said for those stories to get bigger and better and more heroic and stuff like that. But I love the idea, especially in contemporary games, of just your everyday dude who's like a cab driver,
right,
having to fight off like a zombie apocalypse or finding out that vampires are real.
Oh yeah, totally.
You know, and things like that, and then just seeing what they do.
Yeah,
because like I can't relate to, you know, Ebony Ravenwood Smith, the, you know, dark dementia, you know, dark witch of the third dimension or whatever. You know? But I can relate to Carol, who's a store clerk.
Right.
You know?
I mean, a good example Knox just brought up was like Iron Man is hard to fathom as a normal person.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a super genius.
Exactly, yeah. He went out and got another doctor.
Sorry,
like,
let me rephrase it. He's a rich playboy super genius.
Yes.
Like he has 3 classes. He's already multiple levels ahead of everyone. You know, he spent his achievement points on super intelligence, maxed out his money, and, you know, did all. You know, he's level set. He's technically an NPC by all standards in a normal game.
Exactly.
So, like, I could see him hiring people, normal people, and those normal people having, like, you could do a whole game based around the Marvel universe being the extraordinary events, but you just have normal people playing in it. That would be a contemporary game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how does Phil, the cab driver, help rescue 6 other people in Chicago while there's a war going on?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there'd be a lot of background. There'd be a lot of other things, but yeah, there'd be alien troopers and, like, you know, debris falling everywhere, and that would still be a game.
Yeah, and that's the big draw of Call of Cthulhu too. You know, is it because you take that contemporary setting into a horror aspect then, and the fact that you are literally just Carl the cab driver, now suddenly becomes very detrimental to you because you've got these strange, you know, ravenous eldritch forces from beyond the stars that, you know, can just kill you with a flick of their wrist, and you're a cab driver.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. How do you handle that situation?
Right.
Yeah, no, I like that.
I play the trumpet in a jazz band, man. Like
another one that hit me, but it's reversed. Do you remember Last Action Hero? It was a terrible movie.
Yes.
It's a flip of that to a degree.
It is.
You've got a normal kid who ends up going into an extraordinary world, and then you have an extraordinary person coming back to the normal world.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't lose his place. He has to remember that things are extraordinary in his world.
Yep.
And once he figures that out, he's a normal person again. He can figure it out.
Yeah.
Like he knows how to be a hero again. And I think that's kind of its own thing there, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, imagine if you had superheroes who lived in a superhero world, like, you know, with Batman and, you know, Superman and all those kind of things. And those people get pulled out realizing that world is fake. It's 100% fiction. And they fall into the real world with basically no powers. But they still have the drive within them. Yeah. To do the right thing.
They would get themselves killed, and they would end up in an episode of Jackass.
Correct. Probably. So, I guess this begs to ask the question: why do contemporary?
Okay. I can think of a couple of reasons off the top of my head.
Go for it.
The first reason would simply be less suspension of disbelief.
Okay.
I mean, when you role-playing games largely take place in our mind. You know,
agreed.
They are narrated to us by the storyteller,
right?
By and large, unless you've got an impressive set of miniatures, and even then,
I agree.
And even then, you know, all that has to be told to you. So your brain has to do the processing essentially.
I agree, 100%.
And so, the less processing your brain has to do, the more processing power your brain has to do things like get into character.
Mm-hmm.
And think about what your motivations are, what the story's doing, what you might, you know, how you might react to certain situations, and you don't have that level of abstraction. So even with something as popular as Dungeons and Dragons, even if you are playing something like Zeros to Heroes, where you're Bob the farmer now,
right?
You still have to imagine what a medieval farmer would be like,
or what they would know, or what they didn't know.
Exactly. Like,
and I almost think that D&D kind of presets you to have this imagination that everyone's a hero. And everyone has, these grandeur thoughts. But if you're starting out as a zero, you don't have those thoughts yet.
You don't have those thoughts yet. This is your origin story.
Right. Your life stinks, ? Or your life is just normal.
How many chickens is a sword worth?
Right. Right. Why would I buy a sword?
Uh-huh.
Like, I'm just going to go talk to the Lord of the Land. Yeah, he's a dick, but at least he'll solve the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
He still wants his tomatoes,
Right. So you've got that level of abstraction you still have to work through as a, as a fantasy player. But with a contemporary game, it's set here.
Yeah.
Nowadays.
Yeah.
100%. So, if you've got things like, what would you do? Well, I would look it up on the internet. Okay, make a investigation check for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Bingo. Like, you've got things like that. You've got libraries. You've got cell phones. You've got modern conveniences like cars and transportation.
Mm-hmm.
That's also kind of the downfall, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I think we'll get there.
But also, I think it kind of gets you out of your typical, like, I think D&D has become, very much, it's always been kind of the staple.
Sure.
If you're going to be role-playing, you can almost use D&D, like, as that sort of brand name shortcut, for, nobody knows what role-playing is, but if you say I'm playing Dungeons & Dragons this weekend,
right?
People are like, oh, yeah, okay, I've heard of that.
Well, I mean, at the same time, someone says, I'm playing Dresden Files this weekend, some people will be like, what? Yeah. Really? Like, that kind of a thing, or I'm playing Buffy this weekend, or I'm playing Angel this weekend. Those kind of things would definitely do the same kind of piece to it. But I like being able to give people the theater of the mind's eye in an easier way. Mm-hmm. Definitely is a appealing aspect, especially for early storytellers, because the stories become more about what is going on, what's the fantasy that's happening.
Right. Right.
Now we step into the other side of the coin. Why wouldn't we do it? I'm going to say the first thing for me is I live in the real world. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why I want an escape.
Yeah.
Why I need that level of escape.
And that is perfectly valid, man. Because honestly, after a long day of work, of dealing with people and the stresses of life and stuff like that sitting down and then pretending to be in the real world with the stresses of life, it's not...
True.
I want to fight some dragons, man,
No, I'm with you. I'm totally with you on that.
My biggest Achilles heel, I think, for contemporary games is that modern conveniences solve too many problems for me. And I think it's probably just a problem with my own mindset as a storyteller. Like,
sure.
I'm sure, like, this is a me problem, not a contemporary gaming problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that I come from a pretty strong fantasy background, so I think of things like transportation being an issue, because how many horses can you afford? Or are you guys just going to teleport, but you're going to have to shell out the gold for that unless you can find, someone willing to do it for you. Or you have a wizard in your group who's powerful enough to do that,
Mm-hmm.
Transportation becomes an issue. Well, in modern times, you just hop on a plane.
Yeah. Like, at the same time, if
we need to be in Cairo tomorrow? Okay.
At the same time, if you're like, we need to, there's a shutdown on all travel, that's a serious thing. You can't just get in your private jet and drive away, fly away. Like, the air traffic control would have something to say about that. The military would have something to say about that. And so you run into problems where you basically have to say no to certain things because that doesn't work that way. An average, detective can't just walk into a police precinct and, suddenly command things. Mm-hmm. No, they're all going to look at you like, who the hell are you? No, I work for a living. I'm going to go get a donut, and then I'm going to go get my radio, and I'm going to call whoever's out on patrol, and they're going to go look at that thing.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it can't be that important unless you're telling me someone's dying. But if you'd like to go talk to my captain... He'll be here tomorrow at 9 a.m. because he's gone for the day.
You can make an appointment.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly.
You start reaching out toward like Brooklyn Nine-Nine kind of levels of comedy there. So
now I did have some moderate success with a modern game. And it was set very much in one of those like alternate sort of worlds where
sure.
It was a D&D D20 modern.
Okay.
Back when that was a thing, back in the 3.5 days.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was D20 modern, and then it was taking place as if the D&D manual of the planes was real.
Oh.
So, like, the elemental plane of fire was a thing. The elemental plane of, like, evil, the abyss, was a thing.
Right.
And what happened, basically, was the veil between our world and, the real world, our world,
sure,
broke down. And in certain places, like, the middle of the desert, the elemental plane of fire started bleeding through because it's a very hot, arid place. It had an attunement with that. Certain larger cities like, Detroit, Cleveland, things like that, the abyss started bubbling through because they're old Rust Belt cities, and they're places of kind of past their prime. They're kind of places of decay. I can say this because I live in Detroit, and I was born in Buffalo, which is another Rust Belt city. So I'm not just throwing shade here.
No, fair enough, fair enough.
But in that setting, and then, but here's the thing though, is that the motivation that my players had was that they were this took place, a little bit after this event took place.
Right.
And so it was established already. There was a kind of quasi-governmental agency that kind of came together, like a special forces group, to kind of deal with things and try to salvage what was left of humanity out of all the chaos that bubbled up.
Okay.
And so they were essentially a SEAL team.
Sure.
And off dealing with supernatural threats of these basically D&D creatures that I was importing into a D20 modern game.
Right.
Because they now had a reason to be there in the setting.
Gotcha, okay.
And then there was some like Lovecraftian culty stuff going on where people were like, oh, it's the end times, we should worship this sort of thing. And,
there's always somebody like that.
Better to stand at its right hand than in its path sort of stuff. So, I had some moderate success with that. It didn't. Okay. We had some scheduling difficulties, which is what actually ended up ending the game. But,
right.
But it was kind of cool while it lasted.
Sure. Okay.
But I think that was probably, aside from Aberrant, that was really my like main foray into contemporary.
Yeah, I think the other thing that gets me for contemporary are two things, and the other one I'll leave till the end, and that is the first thing is that getting something to be larger than life tends to have to get more and more into stepping into fantasy.
Yeah.
And you have to have reasons for that. Like, you have to craft why something is the way it is. With D&D, there's an elemental plane of fire. There's an elemental plane of water. Yeah. Like, creating elementals, having magic. Yeah, it's all magic is a thing. But if you're like, okay, I am in this contemporary setting of Chicago, and now there is a wizard coming out of a portal. Okay, how does that work?
Wizard's a thing?
Yeah, how is this a thing, Or something as simple as, like I was saying, like they come into a crime scene and someone's stuck to the ceiling. Right. And there's nothing exploded in the room. There's just a body stuck to the ceiling. And you're like, okay, how did it get there?
Right.
And so now you have to come up with reasons, in your own mind, at least as a storyteller, for the logic behind why that's happening that way. So that when your players start investigating and discovering things, it makes sense. Is it angels? Is it demons? Is it otherworldly? Is it, something from space? What caused those effects so that they can then discover it and move through it?
Right.
And that's where the fantasy starts becoming more of a challenge. If your setting already has that baked in, okay. Like Shadowrun, it's baked in. Like, everybody can read through it, see how the things work, move through it based upon those things, and then you have contemporary elements attached to it. But if you're starting from whole cloth, that can get really challenging to try and keep up with. The second thing, and it's the most important reason why I don't necessarily like contemporary stuff, is people playing themselves.
Oof, here we go.
So there have been a number of times when storytellers have looked at me and said, oh, we're doing this vampire game. In modern setting, you start out as yourself. I'll help you make your character of you. And I'm like, oh, this is going to go real bad.
Yeah.
Because how much do you know of what you know? How much of that is real? And then they're applying points to who you are?
Yeah. And honestly, Here's the thing: is anytime I've had the opportunity to play myself, I could not find motivation.
Yeah.
Because I can come up with a million reasons why a heroic fantasy character will choose to go out and be heroic in a fantasy world.
Yep.
And do heroic things like fight dragons. Okay, which is maddening if you think about it.
Sorry, I just saw Knox's post.
No. No, 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 no,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, I agree. I agree. It's not.
But like, first things first. It's like, okay, you're playing yourself, and you've been embraced by a vampire, and now you're a creature of the night, and you must feast on blood. Oh, okay, I kill myself. I just watch the sunrise because I'm not gonna do this.
I know what eternity feels like. I've seen it in a game before. Not dealing with this. It's gonna turn out wrong.
I feel bad squishing spiders around my house. I'm not gonna be able to feed on people for the rest of my life.
Right. Never killed a person before. Not gonna handle this situation.
Yep. Nope. We're just gonna watch the sunrise. Okay, game over.
Second thing, and this is just me. Everybody at your table does not have the exact same experiences. When you start dealing with contemporary games, things like legitimate horror is walking down the street and getting caught by somebody. Or, it's like, if it's your life, okay, so now I've got a female who's playing my game, and she's playing herself, and the storyteller says, hey, okay, so you're on your way to work, and you're walking out to your car, and a guy comes out of the shadows. So now, that's in her head.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's there, and she's thinking about it when she's leaving work the next day.
Yep.
A
lot easier to hit on actual honest-to-goodness trauma and triggers. And
I know quite a few friends who are currently in the military and some who are no longer in the military, and both have lost friends from trauma in the military causing other effects, psychological effects.
Yep.
The idea of them having to deal with or seeing people die in a non-fantifical way, that they can't detach themselves from, it would be horrific.
Yeah.
So I just caution people when you're dealing with situations like that and doing contemporary games, you got to know your audience.
Yeah.
And you kind of got to read them ahead of time because they may not know nearly as well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I sit with things. That's just me. That's just where I'm at.
I think it's perfectly reasonable. I don't think I've ever had a good experience playing myself or anything like myself in a game.
Yeah. So I think pushing to fantasies are good. I think having an established semi-fantasy contemporary world is good. So I think, vampire's good. Again, I'm not going to play it in Detroit as my friends. I might play it in Detroit so we all in the theaters of the mind's eye, we have frame of reference. Like, oh, you mean they all hang out at the Masonic Temple on the 16th floor? Because that's a coven?
And it could be a cool opportunity to take fantasy, elements into real life places. Like, what goes on at the Detroit Opera House, in the sub-floors of it that were built,
Exactly. Like, how far down does New York subway tunnels go? You might know because you're a urban...
It's turtles all the way down.
Right. Nice. I knew you were going to do that. Damn it. So, but that's the whole thing is that, like, you can use contemporary things in a fantasy-esque, and then that adds that contemporary layer for you.
Yeah.
You can put in contemporary jokes into things like Shadowrun and get a lot of feeling out of it and a lot of fun.
We were we've talked about the setting being a character kind of in and of itself.
Very much so. It's very living,
especially in games like Powered by the Apocalypse, like Urban Shadows, and also in the Dresden Files RPG.
Yeah.
During character creation, basically during your session 0, there is a part where you create the city, the setting.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we were doing is when Sean was trying to run Dresden Files for us for a little bit. Again, scheduling conflicts just destroyed that for us, but it was great when he was running it. But we were playing in Detroit, and what we did was we took a little bit of time to kind of look into the lore of our city and look up, like, ghost tales and things like that, and then say, what if these were real?
Yeah.
Look up urban legends.
Yeah, exactly.
around the place. If you're going to play in a contemporary setting, and then just say, okay, what would be a fantasy?
Yeah, what's 1 degree beyond that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What would if we +1?
Yeah. Hey, what's that thing down in Mexico? Eats all the
chupacabra, sir.
Yeah. What about chupa thingy? Can we get one of those? I love that kind of stuff. Well, we've got a little bit of time for questions.
Yeah.
I think we still got like 20 minutes or so we got some time on this. Let's do this thing.
Meat on that bone.
All right. Let's start with the Mad Elf.
All right.
Do you have a contemporary setting that you would like to play or run in for which there isn't a game already in place? Now, he said Dresden Files, which is funny.
Which is funny because there is
a Dresden. It's funny how many game settings there are out there that most of us don't know about that exist.
Okay, so contemporary setting, you would run or play a game which isn't already a game in place. Okay, so
nice.
There is a Dresden Files game. We've played it. It's wonderful. It's set using the Fate system.
Right.
What I would say, though, is a mutual friend of ours has turned me on to the October Day series.
Okay.
By Sean and McGuire.
Oh, yes.
Now, that is contemporary fantasy as well, but it is all based around the Fae.
Yes.
The fairies.
Mm-hmm.
The main character is the eponymous October Day, who is a half she changeling.
Nice.
Half she, half human.
Nice.
And because of this strange place in her world, 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
Ooh.
And she's a private investigator. And
makes sense.
Hilarity ensues.
Nice.
And I really, really, really enjoy the way that Shauna McGuire writes the Fae.
Mm-hmm.
And because it is completely dedicated to that and not trying to spread it across every fantasy creature that's ever existed, like the Dresden Files does, kind of. No, mind you, I really greatly enjoy Jim Butcher.
No joke.
And I'm
good
a
writing.
Huge Dresden Files fan. But he does kind of spread himself a little thin in that you don't get a lot of the lore behind individual sects.
Sure.
Though it is spread across many, 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 many books.
Right.
All of Shauna McGuire's stuff is based around the Fae, so you get really in depth into like court politics and how that whole society works, and it's fascinating, and I would love to play there.
Nice. Okay.
Would need the right storyteller for it, though.
Definitely, and I think to a degree you'd have to do what a lot of the systems do in those types of things, where they talk more about the world and less about the original story that it came from, so that you can play something different, that you're not playing that storyline, those characters.
Yeah, exactly.
They exist somewhere else. It's CSI Miami, and now it's CSI, I don't know, Charlotte.
Sure.
And that's the difference there. And I think that I think for settings like that, like one of the ones that came up in here, X-Files, would be kind of a neat thing to do as well.
Would be cool.
Because again, it's a focused point because it's unusual situations, but a lot of it seems to rotate around maybe, and I need to mess up my hair for this, aliens, but I think in general, it is about the unknown with a giant question mark. And I think that's kind of a neat way to do things because you can really push a lot of boundaries there. Again, you start running some risks with how you want to play in that world because not everyone's going to be part of the investigation at the government level and have all the access. Those types of things. Another contemporary one that I would kind of think would be fun.
Sure.
But I think it's the Veil kind of thing, is Stargate.
Oh, Stargate would be amazing.
Yeah, and play it a little further back. Like, play it, or like early Stargate program.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas they've kind of pushed it a little bit farther along the line, it's still pretty contemporary. They've just done a lot of shit in a small amount of time.
Sure.
But I think that would be kind of a fun world to play in with semi-normal people because there's all kinds of other groups that are dealing with the Stargate.
Oh, there's
got to be other shit going on.
Anything on the other side of a Stargate. That's pretty much the entire recipe for the first 3 seasons was, hey, we dialed a random number.
Yeah, because we sent a team in
on our chart.
And here's the procedure that you have to follow.
Yep.
So in a way, it's kind of Shadowrunny because you've got a team that's been picked together.
Yeah.
That all have a common purpose. You all work for one corporation, the government, and you're going through a hole in the wall. Maybe. Because maybe that isn't your job this week. Maybe your job is something landed in a cornfield in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
We think it's a transport ship, and it's hidden because 2 guys got killed by a couple FBI agents who may or may not have made it. You need to go recover that thing and find it and make sure nobody else in town finds it. Go for it.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that I think is a really good contemporary system that would be fun.
Heatsink brings up in the live chat here, SCP Foundation.
Oh, SCP?
Yeah.
Neat. Okay.
Are you familiar?
It's SCP is
Secure Containment Protocol.
Yeah.
Okay, so for those of you not familiar with SCP Foundation, first off, Google it. You won't be disappointed. It is an online collaborative writing project, basically. They've created a vast wiki, literally thousands of these things now.
Yeah.
And they're all just unexplained things.
Yeah.
And there's this kind of pseudo-fiction, not pseudo-fiction, but like a quasi, metafiction, basically, that's kind of sprouted up around it of, no one really sat down and wrote what the SCP Foundation was, but it gets defined by the stories and how the SCP Foundation is told through those stories.
Yep.
And what it is, it's a collection of case files.
Nice.
Okay? So they're not going to tell the story about this thing, like John went and did, saw this and picked this up, and then this happened to him. But it's like a, this is SCP-437. SCP-437 must be contained in a 4 foot by 4 foot concrete cube room. It must be password protected and guarded at all times. No one without X level clearance is allowed in there. It exhibits X property, Y property, and Z property.
Right.
And like tons of redactions and stuff
you
that.
can't,
so you don't even know what
material
some of this
type
stuff
is redacted.
Redacted, exactly. It remained inert at all times, except for when Dr. Redacted did redacted.
Right.
And it's like a big black line.
Yeah.
Like, wow, there must have been something going on there.
Exactly.
But it's all blacked out.
Okay.
But there's a lot of really cool stuff in there. And then people will start writing and playing off of other people's SCPs.
Nice.
And so there's a lot. There's
I think I've seen a few of these on Reddit.
Almost like the Cthulhu mythos kind of popped up.
Right.
Where it wasn't all Lovecraft, but other people inspired by Lovecraft's writings wrote Lovecraft-esque stuff.
Okay.
And that whole kind of collection, like The King in Yellow,
Okay.
it is not Lovecraft, but he's kind of part of the Lovecraft mythos now. And so SCP Foundation kind of defines the same sort of thing, where there's a lot of like meta plots that kind of pop up if you read certain different SCP files. And there could be some really cool stuff in there, like going out to get some of these things, or maybe being the researchers involved in them.
That'd be kind of neat.
Or, lots of great stuff like that. So,
grab Overwatch's question before we run out of time.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
All right.
You're enjoying this.
You know what? I'm actually going to skip Overwatch.
Oh.
Because I want to grab the Arcane Asylum.
Do it.
Because I really love this question.
Go for it.
In regards to PC hit points, do you believe the fleshy water balloon systems, like Call of Cthulhu, are more compelling, as opposed to tanky systems where unrealistic injuries might break immersion? First off, I want to give you so many points for calling it the fleshy water balloon system.
It is the fleshy water balloon system. Yeah. No, I agree with that statement pretty hardcore. I would say that there are positives and negatives, and it really comes down to your players. Like, if your players are willing to be expendable, I think that adds a whole level of stress that they might enjoy. They might enjoy that level of stress and drama. On the other hand, if your players want to play heroes who survive and they get used to their characters, they're going to absolutely hate that they could pop at a moment's notice and that everything is stressful. It comes down to who your players are.
Yeah, I think...
Do you like roller coasters? Do you like roller coasters with no seat belts?
That is an excellent way of putting it. I think there's two things to keep in mind. The squishier your characters are, the further you're going to stray from fantasy, heroic fantasy to horror
and gritty horror.
Gritty horror, real darn quick.
Yeah.
Now, I like starting out at level 1 characters with 6 hit points, and kobolds become real scary at that level.
Sure.
You know, I had a level 1 like cleric who was like, they're just zombies.
Dead.
And then the zombie rolled like a d8 damage to hit him, and he was like, that was most of my hit points.
Yep.
Yeah, buddy.
Yep.
Congratulations, you are a average Joe Schmo.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing to keep in mind is that hit points are representative.
Yeah.
They're just representative of an amount of punishment you can take. And just because a battle axe dealt a d12 damage to you does not mean that it hit you and gouged into your flesh and that you are now shrugging that off.
No, and that's where I was saying you can play an edge of injury.
Exactly. I mean, you know, you probably deflected it at the last time. It was a good hit, but that put an undue amount of stress on you.
Yes.
And really, it's probably only the killing blow that actually, quote-unquote, lands.
Yeah.
You know, that you do actually, oops, I zigged when I should have zagged, and the enemy ran me through.
Right.
Now I'm at 0 hit points.
Or you're unconscious, which is the way 7C plays it, is that you're not dead.
Well, at 0 hit points.
Right.
Whatever happens game mechanically from there. But, you know, that's the one that dropped me.
Right.
Regardless of what dropped means.
Exactly. Now,
keeping in mind, too, we talk a lot about, incidentally, about Palladium, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Rifts, those sort of things.
Yeah.
This is exactly why Palladium introduced the system for SDC.
Yes.
Structural damage capacity.
Right.
Because I can do things like, you know, you and I can punch each other.
Sure.
And that's going to deal what we call SDC, okay? There's a certain amount of punches that we can take from each other, but it's not going to kill us.
Right.
Okay? Now, if I keep punching you, there is a certain point where those impacts are going to start actually reducing your life.
Right.
And if I continue, I will kill you.
Yes.
Okay? But up to a certain point, little bumps and bruises and flesh wounds and, you know, grazing shots and stuff like that, they're going to leave bruises. They
Scars.
You know, scars. But they're not going to, you know, incidental bleeding, but they're not going to kill you.
Right. They can be healed.
Things like if I poisoned you, though, that skips your SDC. That goes straight to hit points.
Right.
Because that is killing you.
Correct.
Period.
Right.
And so that's why you have that separation. It's interesting to think about, is all I'm gonna say. So in how what a hit point is, what the quantity of a hit point is, how you quantify that in your world, and how then you storytell that and represent that. So technically, if you roleplay it that only the killing blow is the one that actually landed and everything else is bumps and bruises that almost hit.
Yep.
Technically, every game is a fleshy water balloon game.
That's true. That is true. I would agree with that
because
statement.
a sword is a sword is a sword.
Fair enough. All right, I am going to grab Overwatch's question then.
All right, do it.
Normally, pop culture references and modern sensibilities can be derailing or immersion breaking in a fantasy or sci-fi setting. But how do you handle them in a modern game where they are contextually appropriate?
Let me reread that. Normally, oh yeah. I'd say if it's
truly appropriate,
if they're contextually appropriate, why would they be derailing?
Right.
You know?
I don't think they are derailing, but I think I get where he's coming from, is that if everyone is throwing pop culture references around, you know, that it's part of their character in the game doing that. Mm-hmm. I think that comes back down to role-playing.
Yeah.
Like, is your gritty military guy really throwing around those kinds of jokes, you know, offhandedly? Mm-hmm. Is he talking about Popeye, you know, or is he, you know, throwing some meme about cats around? So it comes back to, who are you playing? You know, the idea is that you're role playing something. You're playing a role. Is that role person a tween who's all about living memes? Sure, then go right ahead and do that thing. But at the same time...
What class are you? I'm a dank meme lord.
Get out of my game. So, but I think that's the kind of stuff that you really want to manage a little bit differently when you deal with those kind of situations, is that if something is disrupting the game, talk about it. Mm-hmm. If it's setting appropriate, like I remember in Shadowrun, my wife's character, Meat, who was a troll, and like nothing but luck and everything, literally we were sneaking into a place, and as she's sneaking, she's saying that her character is going sneak, 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 and then when guards come by, she plasters herself to the wall, this giant troll, and basically tries to hide against the wall.
Okay.
Or like grabs a fern and puts it in front of her face because she believed her character was all about cartoons and loved cartoons. So he's basically this giant troll kid, who's hanging out with all these other people and doing these shadow runs because he's a fucking troll, but still believing all the tropes of those things. And so it wasn't immersion breaking for the character to be doing those things. And I think those kind of situations fit. I think that makes sense and can add a lot of flavor.
Yeah, good. I mean, and I also think there's room for joking around at the table. I mean,
100%.
I know we all wanna have these like great epic stories that are things like Tolkien would have written, but honestly, if somebody like one of my favorite moments in Critical Role,
sure,
there's a character named Ford.
Oh yeah, okay.
FJORD, but he pronounces it Ford.
Ford, yeah.
And at one point, when they very early on in the campaign, they acquired some horses, and so he asked if his was a Mustang. And everybody hard rolled. You'd hear the eye rolls.
Yep.
And he was like, oh, okay, hey, I'm just asking. Like, I could just ask, can't I?
Because he wants a Ford Mustang.
All right. Like, what if I named it? What were you going to name it, Ford? Shelby? Yeah. And again, you could hear the eye rolls.
Yep.
But obviously it's a pop culture reference.
100%.
Come on, it's funny.
It is funny.
And we move past it.
Right. Right.
You guys, in my game, the Surly Girl Scout.
Not even that. I was going to go straight to the Bards competition. 100%. Lord Arroway walks in and
Lord
they're
Thalian Arroway.
They're getting ready to write down the name. So what's the name?
What name should I announce you under, my lord? Aerosmith.
And we literally all stood up and just slow clapped him right there on the spot. It needed to happen.
And
it was fine. It was beautiful. It was fine. He deserved the inspiration he got for it.
And then we just moved forward. Like just let it happen.
Let it happen.
And just roll forward. As long as it doesn't get too zany and out of hand.
Yeah.
It's good.
I can remember sessions of my 7C game with you guys where literally the puns didn't stop one day. Like between Trev and Chris and you, the puns just kept coming. I was fine with it because you guys were at least doing it in character.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Exactly. And I was fine with it. But it was to a level of disruption, but at the same time, everybody was still having a good time.
And if it was in character,
whatever.
I mean, then what's to say the characters aren't just having that fun? You know? I mean, sure. I mean, we're all enjoying it as players, but if the characters get into a little pun match while they're traveling down the road, then
why not?
Just
let it roll. Let the thing happen. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I think we got one more question from the Mad Elf, actually.
Okay.
What are some traditional, non-contemporary games that you'd like to convert to contemporary game setting because you like the system?
My first thought was going to be D&D 5th edition, but I think that's so mired in its own setting that I don't think that it would work out too well.
Yeah, I like the 7C system in general, 1st edition. I like that roll and keep methodology, so there's a lot of times when I'd like to push that to a contemporary system because I think it could happen. I think the magic and some of the swordplay would have to change to fit that, but I think it could work. I think you could still bring the system over without much difficulty.
Yeah.
Because it's blood-based magic, and I think that's really good. I think that helps out a lot.
I gotta be honest, I can't think of anything else. I really can't think of any other game that I've ever looked at and said,
like the system.
I wish I could play that in contemporary. You know?
I mean, I get it. There's definitely a lot of systems out there that are very simple that you could just play contemporary without a question.
Yeah.
But for me, I think it would be 7C 1st edition. I'd want to bring it over. I'd want to port that.
I don't really fall in love with systems though. I fall more in love with settings. So
okay, fair enough. Well, we are getting close to the end. I think next week we're doing plot twists and red herrings, right?
For April 1st.
That is hilarious.
Plot twists and red herrings.
Well, you can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave, on Instagram at @ST_conclave, now on MixLR at mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave, and on Discord. Our link is also in the Twitter every week, so you can find it there.
I want to give a big shout out to our Patreon members, Knox in the Box and Sam, for supporting the show, and all the rest of our Patreon members. Thank you so much for helping us keep doing this. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Keyfrog. You can find it at keyfrogmusic.weebly.com or on Google Music. And our outro music is Only Footprints in Sand by Mid-Air Machine. You can find it on soundcloud.com/Mid-Air Machine.
We also are going to be no longer recording at Podcast Detroit. We do want to thank Caitlin and Dave and the staff there for their help for almost the last year. It's been pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
But we'd also like to thank our families. Vicky, Sean, thank you so much for doing this with us, and all of our friends who play our games, and of course you, our listeners.
We love you.
Good night.